Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everybody. We move from education and education reform, hopefully, which is something that is dear to my heart, to another important topic, and that's really the topic of the hour, and that is what is going on in the Middle East. And the theme of this session is, broadly speaking, Egypt and the Middle East in 2011. When we started the conversation with Ben-Meir about his talk, it was basically to talk about the peace negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But all of a sudden, it seems that the latest events have overshadowed the peace negotiations, and now we are talking about liberation movements almost in the Middle East. Our speaker this morning is Dr. Ben-Meir, who is a world-renowned expert on Middle East politics and affairs, specializing in peace negotiations and conflict resolutions. For the past 20 years or 25 years, Dr. Ben-Meir has been directly involved in various negotiations, and he operated as a liaison between top Arab and Israeli officials. Dr. Ben-Meir served as a senior fellow at NYU, New York University Center for Global Affairs, where he teaches courses on Middle Eastern studies and international negotiations. He is also a senior fellow at the Middle East Project Director at the World Policy Institute. Dr. Ben-Meir, some of you probably are familiar with his blog. He writes regularly a weekly column in Jerusalem Post and has appeared in DOMES, newspapers and magazines and websites, and has been writing books, and about 7 books so far related to Middle East policy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ben-Meir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mohammed. I'm grateful to you for your wonderful introduction. As Mohammed was speaking, my blood pressure was rising, thinking, what am I supposed to live up to what he's been just saying? Thank you again for having me here today. And what I'd like to do is, we have roughly, I guess, about an hour in total, to make some observations, a few observations, and perhaps take less than half the time for these observations, and then allow a little bit more than half the time that we have for questions and answers, and this way we can sort of illuminate and discuss some of the more relevant issues that is going on today in the Middle East. Let me begin by suggesting, you know, when we are observing, those who are observing the Middle East today and what's happening in Tunisia and in Egypt, many people have been expressing surprise, saying no one could have possibly thought that such an uprising would take place in Egypt, or Tunisia before that. And that is looking at the Middle East for so many decades. With the current the regime, that many of them have been in existence for 30, 40 years. Nobody really, and perhaps for good reason, expects such a change. It is not that I, and certainly some others, have thought that change will have to come sometime. But from my perspective, when I review the situation in the region, I have answered those who are saying this could not have happened, should not have, why, how is it possible it happened? I say, what do you really expect? That is, if we were to assume for a moment that the Arab youth are going to remain dormant, subjugated to the end of times, I consider that to be nothing less than an insult to the Arab world and to the Arab youth. That is, it was only indeed a question of time. When will they rise? Not if they are going to rise. And we can attribute the rise, the uprising in Tunisia and Egypt to many, many factors. Certainly the internet have helped, certainly Facebook and Twitter and others. But the truth of the matter is, what has happened in Tunisia and Egypt and now is raging throughout the Middle East has come from within. The time has come for them to say enough is enough. We will no longer take it. And so what we are seeing today then, the youth are no longer accepting the status quo. And I therefore feel proud and salute them for having finally rised up and say we will no longer take it and we are going to do something about it. And this is extraordinarily significant. The second observation I want to make is that when we looked at the uprising in Tunisia and in Egypt and now elsewhere, we did not find these young men and women looking for a scapegoat. We did not see banners, death to Israel, down with the United States. They have pointed the finger to their own leaders, to the despots that have been subjugating under for so long. They were saying to them, countries like the United States or Israel for that matter, or any of the European countries, every country have the right to protect its own interest. And so whatever policy they may have instituted, this is the right of these countries. But what are you have been doing, you, the leaders of the Arab world? How is it that you have not taken care of our country? That is, it is essential to understand here, in my view, that not looking for a scapegoat is fundamental in this change, in this uprising, because it means that it's going to stay with us for a while, and it's going to have to continue. And this will bring me to the third important observation. The Arab world today better understand that this wave is not going to stop. A change is going to have to take place. And obviously it's going to be different from one country to another. But those countries like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia today will try and just waking up and say, well, what shall we do about it? And trying to shell some money. Like, for example, the Bahrainis decided to give every family $2,600 or $2,650 in an effort to buy the youth, to quell the uprising with some money. It's another insult added to this dignified movement. The people, the young people of the Middle East today, they do not want hands out, they want a voice. And that's what they want. The Arab state better begin to understand this is not something that they can buy with money anymore. They're going to have to undertake major development, educational development, certainly economic and political development, in order to be able to answer this thirst, the quest of the people for change, a meaningful change, so that they can live their life with dignity. The other observation, it's important.